What's up everybody, and welcome back to the Cyclonic Thrift channel. This is once again looking at some new commander from the Outlaws of Thunder Junction set. We've looked at a couple already, and today we'll be taking a look at Riku of Many Paths. So he's a teamer commander, a green, blue, and a red for a 3/3 legendary creature humid wizard. Whenever you cast a modal spell, which we'll talk about modal spells in a minute, choose up to X, where X is the number of times you chose a mode for that spell. And then he's got three options for you. So one, you can exile the top card of your library, and until the end of your next turn, you may play it. You can put a +1/+1 counter on Riku of Many Paths. It gains trample until end of turn. And you can create a 1/1 blue bird creature token with flying. So a lot of versatility here, which is really nice. One, there's a lot of impulse draw, but delayed impulse draw, where you can wait until the end of your next turn to play it. So a lot of lands work with that. Where if you start exiling a ton of lands and you can't really play them all in one turn, you can kind of wait, use as many as you can. It can kind of create a Voltron-y sort of thing with Riku, where we're pumping him up, giving him trample, getting him in for damage. And then we can also just create a bunch of 1/1s with flying, great blockers, great chump blockers, but also great ways to kind of ping our opponents with little damage in combat. So with this deck, I actually really liked the creativity here. It reminded me a lot of Dr. Madison Lee in the Fallout set, where it takes a not incredibly supported mechanic in Magic. You know, for Madison Lee, it was energy counters. For this, it's modal spells, and it creates a commander that gives you a lot of versatility and a lot of options for just casting those types of spells. So for Riku, yeah, we got a lot of versatility here. For me, I didn't really necessarily build around any of the three abilities. I think you can kind of pick and choose, you know, depending on the situation you're in, which mode works best for you. You know, if you're down on cards a little bit, you start getting a little extra card draw from the top of the exiling. You know, if you've got a pretty wide open board, want to get Riku in for some damage, you start pumping him up. Yeah, it gives you the choice, gives you versatility, and, you know, you can choose up to X, so you get all three in one turn. It's any time you cast a modal spell, so you're not limited to, like, this is once a turn sort of deal. You can do it on opponent's turns if you use an instant. So there's a lot of instant sorcery, spell slinger type deals with this. And yeah, I'm really excited to get into it. Was able to research and find a ton of modal cards that I didn't know existed before, but worked really well in this deck. So without further ado, let's get into it. First is we're going to talk about modal spells. So modal spells are instant sorceries that when you cast it, you have different options and you choose those options. So you don't know what the spell is going to do until you actually get it out there. The first is a target's command. It's red and a green for an instant, and you choose 2. So either your opponents can't gain life this turn, it deals 3 damage to each opponent, you put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield, or creatures you control get +1/+1 and reach until end of turn. So with Riku, when you cast this, you're choosing 2 modes, right? So then with Riku, you get to choose 2 of those abilities. So you can exile a card, put a +1/+1 counter on it, or you can do the +1/+1 counter and create a bird, you know, so on and so forth. I noticed as I was going through these decks that anytime you can get a 1-for-1, so 1 mana for 1 choice, 2 mana for 2 choice, 4 mana for 4 choice, that sort of thing, that ended up being kind of the best you can get. As we get to the higher mana values, you know, you're not going to pay 6 mana and get 6 choices, right? It's more of like a 4-for-3, 5-for-3, that sort of thing. But for the lower mana value things, getting 2 choices for 2 mana was actually really, really good. Next card is Quandrix's Command. It's 1, a green and a blue for an instant. Choose 2. Return target creature or planeswalker to its owner's hand. Counter target artifact or enchantment spell. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. And target player shuffles up to 3 target cards from their graveyard into their library. So yeah, again, 3 mana for 2 choices, get a lot of value off the commander. There's just a lot of versatility with this style of play. Next is Verdant Confluence. It's 4 and 2 green for a sorcery, and you choose 3. So when we cast this, we're choosing the 3, we're going to get every single ability off of Riku. And we can choose the same mode for this card more than once. So it's put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature, return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand, search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Yeah, like I said, 6 mana for 3 is not bad, and getting to double up on some of these abilities is going to be really nice. And then, yeah, so a lot of these, well, pretty much every modal spell that counts for Riku is an instant or sorcery, and so we wanted to get a lot of spell slinging support cards into this deck. So cards like Goblin Electromancer, which is a blue and a red for a 2/2 creature goblin wizard. Instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Going to be really nice in getting multiple spells out in a turn to maximize how many triggers of Riku's ability we get. Next is Baral and Kari Zev. It's 1, a blue and a red for a 2/4 legendary creature human. They have first strike and menace. Whenever you cast your first instant or sorcery spell each turn, you may cast a spell with lesser mana value that shares a card type with it from your hand without paying its mana cost. And if you don't, you create Ragavan, a legendary 2/1 monkey with haste until end of turn. So this is just going to be a great way to kind of double up on our modal spells. Again, get a ton of value out of our commander. We've got a nice range of mana costs, so it won't be very uncommon for you to pay 2 to cast instant and then be able to cast 1 cost instant from your hand. What is also nice is because it's each turn, instants become much more powerful because you get to do it on your opponent's turn. And with Riku's ability, when we're exiling and kind of creating our second hand, if we cast a card from exile, then we can choose from our hand the card that we pay for free. It kind of helps keep our hand / the cards we have access to full. And like I said, it's going to get us a ton of value over the course of a turn rotation. The next is Gutter Snipe, classic spell slinger card, 2 and a red for a 2/2 creature goblin shaman. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. So a great way to ping our opponents down. It's very helpful in this kind of deck because we don't really have like a major win con here. Even with Riku out, we're not going to be focused enough on the Voltron-y aspect of him to beat anybody with commander damage. And there's no one spell that's going to win us the game in budget. So this is going to be a nice way to keep everybody's life total low, be able to swing in when we can, ping away at damage here and there, and just keep everything manageable as we move along. And then, like I said, we've got a lot of instants in this deck, and so I wanted to kind of focus on cards that help maximize the effect that instants have. So cards like Wavebreak Hippocamp, 2 and a blue for a 2/2 enchantment creature Horsefish. Whenever you cast your first spell during each opponent's turn, you draw a card. So whenever we're casting instants on other people's turns, going to get a little extra card advantage there, help keep our hand full, and help keep us casting those spells as we move forward. Next is Calamax, the Storm Sire, 1 green, blue, and a red for a 4/4 legendary creature elemental dinosaur. Whenever you cast your first instant spell each turn, if Calamax the Storm Sire is tapped, you copy that spell, and you can choose new targets for the copy. Whenever you copy an instant spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Calamax. So, yeah, this is just going to be a great way to literally double up every instant spell we cast, as long as we space them out, right? Doing it on each opponent's turns, copying them out. Again, copying is technically casting, so Riku will trigger off that copy as well. We're going to get a ton of versatility and a ton of value out of that. And the next is Wilderness Reclamation. It's 3 and a green, for an enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, untap all lands you control. This is going to be super key because it allows us to play all the spells we want to play on our turn without having to worry about saving mana for all the instants to be spent on opponent's turns, because at the end of our turn, we're going to get access to all of our lands and all of the mana that way. And so, yeah, this is going to let us tap out on our turn, cast whatever we want on our turn, not really feel restricted that way, and still have access to everything that we need to cast spells on opponent's turns and gain value that way. And that brings us to the vegetable portion of the deck. For those who haven't seen the channel before, the vegetable portion is where I go through a couple categories of cards that I think are crucial to fill out when you're creating these decks, to make sure that you're keeping pace and being able to play consistently with the more higher powered, higher budget decks at the table. So those categories are mana ramp, card draw, and removal. And I'm just going to run through some cards real quick that fit into each of those categories. So first is Elvish Mystic. It's a green for a 1/1 creature elf druid. You tap it to add a mana. Super simple. There's a ton of cards like this. Going to be nice in this deck. Next is Goblin and Archomancer. Red and a green for a 2/2 creature goblin shaman. Each spell you cast that's red or green costs 1 less to cast. So not quite as universal as the Goblin Electromancer, where its instants and sorceries cost 1 less to cast, but we've got tons of red and green spells in this deck, and being able to get, you know, an extra mana here and there off of it is going to add up in the long run. And then we've already mentioned it before, but Verdant Confluence, 4 and 2 green for the sorcery. And it's nice because it's a modal spell, so we'll be able to get those triggers off of our commander, but it's also a pay 6 mana, get 3 basic land cards on the battlefield tapped. You know, it's a late game play, but the fact that it, you know, strategy-wise, flavor-wise, still fits into the modal spell theme is going to be really nice. In terms of card draw, we've got Sapphire Charm. It's 1 blue for an instant, and you choose 1. Target player draws a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep, or target creature an opponent controls phases out, or target creature gains flying until end of turn. So that's what I really like about these creative commanders that focus on card types and mechanics that don't necessarily have a ton of support, is you get to find these weird cards that, you know, you've never heard before, would never work or be considered good in any deck that you play, but because it's a modal spell, you know, you get that extra value off of it, suddenly it becomes playable. So this becomes a 1 mana, you know, draw a card and get, you know, exile another card. So it becomes kind of like a 1 mana to draw 2, which is awesome. And then also the versatility here, where you could phase out a creature an opponent controls, right? Their commander, or a big hefty guy that's coming in, or a guy that's blocking your commander, that sort of thing. There's a lot of different versatilities here, and a really, just really, what I love about building these decks is coming up and finding cards that normally you would never play, but in these specific decks work really well. Winged Words, 2 and a blue for a sorcery. Spell costs 1 less to cast if you control a creature with flying. We're going to be making birds off of Riku, so that won't be a very hard limitation to hit. And we draw 2 cards off of it. So most of the time it's going to be a pay 2, draw 2, which is a really good rate. We've got Mystic Confluence. It's 3 and 2 blue for an instant, and you choose 3. So 5 mana, choose 3, pretty good. And again, you can choose the same mode multiple times. You can counter target spell, return target creature to its owner's hand, or draw a card. So, you know, again, versatility is what it is. But we'll also get all 3 triggers off of our commander. We're going to pay 5 mana, we're going to get a ton of value out of this. And then for removal, a lot of it is modal spell based, so Decisive Denial is a green and a blue for an instant. Choose 1, either target creature you control fights target creature you don't control, or you counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 3. So it hits both things, right? Doesn't feel like it, but you can either counter non-creature spells, or you can use, I guess presumably your commander is really big at this point, or you can use your commander to take out whatever creature you want. So it hits creatures and non-creatures. It's going to be a nice removal spell that way. Urza's Rebuff is 1 and 2 blue for an instant. You choose 1. Either you counter target spell, or you tap up to 2 target creatures. And then Fiery Confluence. It's 2 and 2 red for sorcery. You choose 3. So 4 mana for choosing 3 is a pretty good rate. Deals 1 damage to each creature, deals 2 damage to each opponent, or destroys target artifact. And again, you can kind of, with all the confluences you might notice, Verdant, Mystic, and Fiery, you can choose the same mode multiple times. So you presumably could either deal 3 damage to each creature, you'll deal 6 damage to each opponent, which could, you know, don't sleep on that, or destroy 3 major artifacts on the battlefield. And that brings us to the Thrift pick of the deck. For those who haven't seen the channel before, the Thrift pick is the card maybe I don't necessarily think is the best in the deck, objectively speaking, but it's the card that, if I have it in my hand, I'm really excited to play. I'm super excited to see how it interacts with the board, how it interacts with our game plan. And the card for this deck is the Case of the Ransacked Lab. It's a enchantment case from the new Murders of Karlov Manor set. It's 2 and a blue for an enchantment case. Instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, so again, that mana ramp, mana reduction aspect of it is going to be really huge. Now, in order to solve it, you have to cast 4 or more instant sorcery spells this turn. So in one turn, you cast 4 instants and sorceries, which, because a lot of our, again, instant sorceries are pretty low mana, that's not going to be, it'll be difficult in the sense that you might not, have the hand of all those instants and sorceries, but in terms of the mana access to it, it won't be too difficult. And once it's solved, it gains the ability of whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you draw a card, which is going to be insane in this deck. Again, a lot of low to the ground modal spells. If we start drawing cards off of each and every one of them, we're just going to refresh our hand every single time. We're going to have a ton of gas, and we're going to be able to just overwhelm our opponents with value, with birds, with extra cards. And so this card is going to be super fun. Again, even if you don't solve it, that mana reduction is still helpful, but if you do manage to solve it, it's going to be a killer. That brings us to the end of the video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Again, I really liked looking at this commander, very unique build behind modal spells. I was excited to kind of, again, look at some cards that I'd never seen before and find some new homes for them. If you can think of any cards that I missed or should have included, please let us know down in the comments. If you haven't already, please subscribe, like the video, and until next time, stay safe and stay thrifty.